Hey, everybody. Before we get started, I want to thank my friends at Hatch for producing this episode. You can get unlimited podcast editing and strategy for one flat rate by visiting hatch.fm. All right, let's get into the show. Welcome to Distribution First, the show where we flip content marketing on its head and focus on what happens after you hit publish. Each week, I share playbooks, motivations, stories, and strategies to help you repurpose and distribute your content because you deserve to get the most out of everything you create. Hey, friend, welcome to Distribution First. On this episode, I'm so excited to have my buddy Travis Tyler on the show. And we had a really fun episode ahead of us here. I can't believe I haven't had you on yet, Travis. I say this to a lot of people, but I feel like the backlog is deep in the distribution friend list here. So welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me. I am honored. I've been a huge Distribution First fan for a long time, going all the way back to when you left Metadata and you started this up. I've looked up to you and admired you. I bought your course. I shared it with all of my team members, from Cornerstone content all the way down. I love it, man. So let's dive into it.
Love it. Awesome. For anybody who's not familiar, so you used to work at PandaDoc and really built up the media hub, for lack of a better, in my brain anyway, at PandaDoc, and really, really cool to reverse engineer what you all were doing there and really what you were spearheading there with the podcast and going media first. And I think that's an interesting thing that I'm seeing in the market. I actually wrote about it in last week's newsletter in terms of the two worlds in content, particularly in B2B content. But it feels like we've got maybe the traditional side of the house where it's SEO, it's blogging, it's performance metrics, it's more classic content marketing, quote unquote, for lack of a better term. And then you've got this, I'll call it new age, right? Like you got this new world where it's media and it's podcast and it's social first and it's brand building and it's, points of view and all these things. And so I think ultimately, if I were advising a company, it's really trying to find that blend, which is ultra difficult because I think a lot of the companies that I talk to don't have the team or the structures or even just the strategy in place to be able to do something like that. We actually did that pretty well, I would say, at TechSmith when I was there, like merging and blending and you were doing it at PandaDoc too, like blending the SEO into the media and trying to like bridge the gap there. But I think for me, what I'm interested in is kind of like, do you see that same thing at your new role, managing social? And then how do you sort of blend those worlds together?
Absolutely. I think I let the data really guide a lot of my decision making when it comes to what I'm actually going to create. So first week at my new job, I was like, get me access to Google Analytics. I want to see traffic trends. I want to take a look at from the last, where it's a younger startup that I'm at now, but I still want to see like which blog articles are getting the most traffic, which ones are getting the most conversions. That's always just a good starting place for source material when you're trying to create some of this newer aged media. You have it institutionally already there. You just need to go digging for it and not necessarily repurpose it, but you need to transpose it. And we can get into that, but certainly our content flywheel here at Motion and the one I implemented at PandaDoc was, let's use that kind of data-driven side of the house, that SEO side of the house, that demand gen side of the house to guide what we're going to create in a more fun, edutainment, brand affinity-esque style and format.
So give me a real like practical example in that, and maybe there's not one on the top of your head, but whether it was PandaDoc or where you're at now, like how are you thinking about that? Like you see a really high ranking SEO post and you're like, all right, I'm going to turn this into some like what's your thought process on that?
That's exactly my thought process. I'm like, all right, like top 15 blog articles over the last year in terms of traffic and conversions. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to grab the copy, the title, and I'm going to just transpose it into how a YouTuber would deliver it on YouTube. And then, yes, using it on the world's second largest search engine and looking with tools like vidIQ to see like what kind of title should I have here. It needs to evoke a little bit more emotion than maybe the blog article does, but seeing like, is there a good amount of monthly search volume for those keywords, and can I make it into something that's interesting with like a fun hook, of me dancing in the first 5 seconds, be like, whoa, I thought this was a video on ad hooks. I thought this was a video on, how to write a proposal. It's like, yeah, it is, but I'm also going to make this enjoyable because I watch a lot of video content and I've taken a lot of your frameworks from searchers and scrollers, and that whole concept of like, and I'm sure most of your listeners are familiar with it, but if they're not, my understanding of it is they're two different audiences entirely. And I've tried to blend the kind of like captivating, scroll stopping energy of scroll content and bringing it and injecting it just a little bit, not too much, not to the point where it gets distracting, but injecting that into my search content. And I get great responses, great feedback, and it also shows in the numbers. So in a quick example would be our highest ranking blog article at PandaDoc was how to write a business proposal. That's what PandaDoc does. It's business proposals. So that makes sense, right? It's how-to content. And I was like, okay, let's turn this into like a 7-minute video. And I hired an actor, I rented a studio and got it edited, wrote the script, got it approved by product, and got it approved by the SEO team that had written the original blog article. Yep, everything looks good here. Everything's accurate. Great, let's publish it. Within 6 to 7 months of it being published and doing all the correct stuff of making sure my vidIQ score is super high with tagging and descriptions and a good thumbnail, we were at like 25,000 views, breaking records on our video content on our YouTube. And looking deeper into it, it's like, well, where did these come from? And we had it embedded on that article that was already ranking high on Google, so that really helped. But it was YouTube's algorithm picked it up as this is useful, helpful content, and people are sticking around and watching like long periods of this video. And then boom, it just took off. And that just recently happened with one of my first videos. I've only been at Motion for like 3 or 4 months, and I've been trying to crack the code. And we finally have a video that actually broke 1,000 views, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you launch a video and you see it gets over 1,400 views in the first week or two, you start to get excited, like, oh, okay, wait, we're onto something here. And it was the same concept. It was a blog article about our top ad hooks in 2024. And we just sourced the material from some of our customers and put it together in an interesting video. And that's what people like.
I'm curious, what do you all sell?
It's advertising analytics.
Bingo.
It's visual analytics. So if you run ads on Meta, Facebook or Instagram, TikTok or YouTube, their ad managers are robust. But when it comes to being able to scale your creative and have a really clear, clean picture of like what is actually working, your creatives are looking at all these like jargony acronyms and they're like, I don't know what the fuck this. I don't know what this is. Motion is a reporting tool that you can send and look over with your creatives anytime you're trying to figure out what's working and what's not.
And the only reason I asked was because the topic of the title, right? Just want to make sure like that's the key is like there's alignment there in terms of what you do. I was actually talking to my buddy, Andy, shout out Andy, if you listen to this earlier in the week. He manages the videos at TechSmith, and we were just kind of reminiscing. Like, I was like, dude, we were so ahead of the game. Like, we started doing that video play in 2019, and it was the same sort of stuff where it was like, we had these like boring topics, right? Like how to record your screen. This is not exciting, but we made an entertaining / educational video about those types of topics for the products we sold. I haven't looked, but I know at one point, these are videos that were scratching 500,000 views on YouTube or like organic, and so it's absolutely bananas. And we did that for like 24 episodes for different, and then we moved them to different products. But that's one of the things that I think is really, really underrated. It's more lift. It's a lot more lift. And I know a lot of teams are sort of like hesitant to like, I think they'd want to, but they don't have a you. They don't have an Andy even like in text, like to be able to do that. Like even when I was at Metadata, I was the video guy. And it was like, I'm not the video guy. You all do, like, I don't think you understand. Like, I don't know video that well. But we, even at Metadata, so very simple, like, because I wanted to try to do some of the same things. And so what we did, because we didn't have sort of video motion, for lack of a better term, like we weren't doing consistent, like more one-off videos, but we had the video podcast. And so what we did was we did an episode where we took one of the top SEO blog posts we had around demand gen interview questions for demand gen marketers, and then did a whole episode about that, and then broke out each individual question into its own YouTube video and then published those. And it was within weeks, because again, you're talking about such a niche, who's doing demand gen interview question videos on YouTube? Not very many people. It was so niche that it started to rank and started to take off. And now it was like, oh, now when you type it in, it's metadata at the top. It's metadata with 2 videos in the feed, the full podcast episode and the individual questions. And it's just, I think it doesn't have to be this overly complicated thing where we have to have, sometimes you can weave those things into your existing models too.
And one thing we were talking about as we were getting ready for this, Justin, that I want to point out to your audience is like, it's simpler than you think in terms of the topics. We want to overcomplicate things. You had that great quote. What was it again? It was like, our brains want to bend to complication or something. What was that?
Yeah, it was just this idea. I was listening to something. They said psychologically we bend toward complicate. Like we think complex is better. Like just naturally, our natural inclination is like the web with 1 million things is like, that's got to be better than the web with 5 things. Like it's got to be. There's more there.
Yeah, it's been completely eye-opening and changing for me as I've shifted away from just being a multimedia digital content producer at PandaDoc, and I'm now a senior social media manager. And we vastly overestimate. I wanted to say we vastly overestimate how smart people are, and that's going to be like, wow, what a jerk. This guy's like, who does he think he is? I think we vastly overestimate how simple an idea needs to be. And I've seen with social media, when you try to plug in too many concepts into a single post, you're going to lose the vast majority of people. One of the ways we've been able to grow our social media following and see our analytics really tick up is simplifying concepts and just doing one post, one concept. Nothing more. Don't try to jam pack. Oh, well, this concept has like 4 different. No, not for a social media post. And yeah, that's been a game changer for us. It's just, again, people are probably listening to this like, cool, dude, what do you mean by simplifying? I'll give you an example. So going back to the first few videos we made here at Motion, I was doing things like top strategies for UGC videos in 2024. Those videos did okay, but it was too much. I was trying to pack in too much. And once I just was like, what if I try something that feels like a little bit basic, which was the best Facebook ad hooks for 2024. And I just went to it, like 2 of our best customers, went onto their Twitters and was like, let me skim over the last 2 years, every ad hook they've ever talked about. And I'm going to give them credit, but I'm going to be kind of like this journalist in a sense who's like gathering this in one place for everybody to look at and adding a little bit of commentary. And that video within like 1 week was our best performing video. So I was like, oh, it's just that simple. People just want to learn about like ad hooks. Like, yeah, they want to learn strategies, but like breaking down specific parts of a strategy. Like, I think the next video I do will probably be like the best Facebook CTAs for 2024. Because it's just one part, like call to action, is just one part of an ad. So it's simplifying the concept and not trying to plug too much into one video, one post.
I love that. I think that it's something that is hard to do unless you're intentional about it and have a plan for it. It's something I'm pretty intentional about within a lot of the frameworks or paths within content repurposing roadmap. It's something I'm intentional about. I try to be intentional about with distribution first, is to not, I actually rarely talk about the full framework ever. It's almost always broken up. If somebody asks, I can lay it out. If I'm working with a client or if I'm coaching through with somebody, like here's our end-to-end roadmap. Here's what we're trying to get to. But it's super complicated. Like people, even like an idea of like you mentioned earlier, like the cornerstone, like the 3C method for content, where you've got this idea of breaking up content into 3 different ways. Like that is overwhelming. It's like, oh my God, like I say, like every quarter, like I got to do like this. And then like, and it's like, let's break up each piece. Like, what is your cut content engine? What's your social engine? What's your email engine? All right, what's your core engine? Are you doing blogs? Are you doing YouTube? Are you doing both? Are you doing a podcast? Like, all right, now let's focus there. All right, now we're going to go to core. Like, do you have any big initiatives? Do you have it? Like, now we're going to break that out. And okay, now that we have these things figured out, how can we make them all work together? Ultimate goal.
Yeah.
But again, it's trying to simplify the things to where, because ultimately, as marketers, what the heck do we want to do? We want to be able to get our message out there. We want to drive demand. We want to be able to sell more product, revenue, da 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 da. But I think in the back of our mind, what we want to do is get in front of our audience as much as possible. And I think we need to be doing more than we actually need to be doing.
That was the biggest paradigm shift when I took your course and like first started talking with you, was more does not equal better.
It's one of the first myths in the course. One of the first things I talk about. Yep.
And it can be hard to have that paradigm shift, to break that muscle we've built up. I think it's hard because it can be boring. And here's what I mean by that. Because, okay, taking the same example I've been talking about, best ad hooks for 2024. If all I'm talking about is ad hooks, it gets a little boring to create, right? Like I'm always talking about the same thing. But unfortunately, that's just kind of the name of the game, is you kind of have to... you know, overcome that boredom, because that's when people will start paying attention to that message, right? I learned that from a CRO. Like by the time you get tired of saying something is the first time it's probably resonating with your first potential customer. Like you, Justin, are probably so tired of talking about distribution.
Some days
that you're like, no, I love it. But you've been spouting it for years. Yeah. And it's just like, you probably are starting to see, year 2, year 3, coming into year 4, I think, where you're like, okay, it's finally starting to like resonate. You're starting to see people use maybe vernacular that you're like, wait, that's where'd you get? So like, I always try to give you credit when I'm like talking about content philosophy and stuff. But yeah, so with cut content, I did 10 ad hooks in my YouTube video, and the video's like 7 minutes long. And then in my cut content version of it, I covered 3 of the hooks and then removed my commentary on it and just showed what the hooks are. And people loved that. And I'm like, well, now I got to do like another cut content of like, probably could just do cut content for each hook. So I got 10 pieces of cut content from that one video. And it's not sexy. It's not exciting, to like break new territory and talk about something new. But at the end of the day, a video that I created within this ad hooks video that got 1,600 views in the first week, and it got us 70 new subscribers to our YouTube channel. Yeah, I know these aren't huge numbers, but we're just getting started. And like when we see something's working, we're like, oh snap. Our first 7-minute video that just got us 70 subscribers in the first week.
There are a lot of companies who would want 70 new subscribers to their email list, 70 new subscribers to their, it's not, again, and I think like this is another thing for companies too, especially early stage companies where you're just trying to get a foot, like you need to build marketing for the right people. I know this is something like Alex Hormozi's even been really talking about. Like he went really wide in his content, like was doing fitness and relationships and business. And he literally was like, no more of that. We had our biggest success as from subscribers and views and all that over that time period, but they didn't convert into buyers of products that he sold, because people who come for the relationship video want more relationship videos. People who come for the fitness videos want more fitness content. And that goes back to the consistency for you too of the board. Like, so now Hormozi, he's like, I'm only doing business content and I'm only doing educational business content. I'm going to help these people.
Yeah.
And so if you think about that from that perspective, like, oh man, now I'm only doing business content. Like I don't get to do the other stuff. But I think as I'm listening to you, and I think as a marketer, because you agreed, right? Like, I think some of it's inherently like repeating yourself is really hard. Every single person I talk to on the show, every single person I talk to where I'm coaching, it's like repetition is very like, we don't like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's how we think we're going to be perceived by the market. But I think the thing I'm learning, the more I do it, the more comfortable you get with it. And it's actually what your audience wants. And if somebody does get bored with your hooks message, with your, whatever those things are, and leaves, they weren't going to buy anyway. I think this is a huge thing. And I'm curious your take on it. It's something I'm starting to shift on, which is, why are we doing content marketing in the first place if not to sell something? It's the blending. It's what we talked about at the beginning. It's the blending of like SEO, and why we love SEO as content marketers is like performance, and like it should drive to conversion, and like we can track it. And why we love the brand building side is because it's fun and it gets people talking, and we can build audiences, and it's really, really cool. But I think at the end of the day, you have to build the right audience, and you have to build the people who want to buy things from you. Because if not, like if you're a company who has 1 million people on YouTube and none of them buy, you're out of business.
Yeah. Or you're in the wrong business and you need to figure out what the right business is.
Yeah, you're at that point, you're having to like lean on like creator mode of like, can we get sponsorships for our show to support what we're doing? You know what I mean? Like, it's a totally, and I'll say this too, like, as I know this, people who have giant audiences that aren't doing well because they don't know how to monetize. Like, I think we get convoluted in that like giant audience equals tons of success, when it's the 1,000 raving fans is really, really true. And I think becoming more and more true, even for a business who wants to grow and wants to be able to like see that growth. I think just the way market forces are going, it's becoming more and more necessary to be able to like really hone in on who those people are. And you can't do the generic marketing stuff, because for you all, right? Like, there's going to be people who come into your world and are like, this content is not for, like, this brand, it's not for me. And that's okay. That's okay. You actually want that. You want and then you want the other half of those people to come in and be like, this is absolutely for me. I'm sick of like the other way to do this boring analytics stuff. I want to come in and like be entertained and do it in a cool way. And it matters.
It does matter. I think the only objection I have to what you said, and I've had to take a step back, feel free to debate this too if you're like,
let's go.
I see some holes in your logic. I sometimes want to ask founders, like, you didn't just start a business to make money. Yes, I did. A little part of you did it to have some fun, right? You want to have a little bit of fun. This is supposed to be fun. You're spending all this freaking time. Don't you want to enjoy it? Well, I enjoy making money. We all do. We all do. But don't you want to have a little bit of ikigai? A little bit of like seeing those circles overlap of making money, doing what you're good at and enjoying it? Wouldn't that be a cool way to conduct business? So that's where I come in with like the having fun piece of like, I don't just make content to sell people. I make content because it's fun for me. But at a certain point, like, I do need to balance those things, right? Like, if I'm just creating wild ass shit and it's fun, but it's not doing anything, then it's like, okay. So I try to strike a balance of diversifying my content that I create on social media, where I am doing memes. I am doing videos of me dancing. I am also doing videos of me showing you really cool educational things where you're like, oh, I just learned something. That's dope. So for me, that's the end goal of my content, is to balance helping, selling, and having my own fun selfishly.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. I mean, even for me, like, as I'm building my own business, it's become very apparent where if I'm not having fun, what am I doing here? And that's me founding my own thing. But I think for anybody trying to grow that business, I mean, that's when the slog happens. That's when the slog really goes down and you start to hate what you're ended up doing. But I think it is that balance. And I think what I'll say is fun is different for different people. Fun for you looks different. Like, I am not going to get on camera and dance. That ain't fun. That's actually horrible for me. I would, make me get up and do a lecture before I have to do that. But like, fun for me, fun for me is honestly like teaching and helping and
Mhm.
coaching. And like, if I get off a coaching call with somebody and you see one light bulb go off, it's like, that is fun. That is so
Yeah.
fun.
That's a good distinction. That is a good distinction.
You know, I don't want people to think, oh gosh, now I got to do like dancing video. Cause I think that's, you know, that happens too, right? Like, oh, you know, we got to do the dancing video. And it's like, no, be true to yourself and your brand. But
Be true to yourself, living your truth. I think it's finding what's fun for you. A good way to figure that out, if you're like, well, I don't know it's fun. A really good lesson I learned a while ago is like, where do you get into flow state where you completely lose track of time? I remember a VP of marketing asking me that as I was like a T-shaped marketer, or I was trying to become a T-shaped marketer because I was just like such a generalist. And it was like, where do you lose track of time? Where do you like look up and you're like, oh shit, it's been like 4 hours. And for me, it was like recording and editing videos that I was just howling laughing at in my living room. And I was like, okay, if I can blend that with some of, and making sure that, you know, it's not just all shock value, that people are stopping the scroll, but then they're coming back because they're like, I actually got something out of this other than just a laugh. I learned a little bit of something here, and I respect what Travis is doing, and I can tell he's enjoying it. And yeah, that's been a big nuance for me. I know there's more we want to talk about, so we can dive into like more
there is. I know
more tactical stuff for your audience.
I don't know. I think this is all tactical and good stuff. I think it's interesting. A lot of the conversations that I end up having on the show, I don't know if you kind of figured out recently, like there is more mindset stuff that's coming into play. I just think in order to do this stuff, you have to have a mindset shift in a lot of these things. So, but one of the things I did absolutely want to touch on is your content flow. So anybody listening to the show on the podcast, we'll do our best to describe what this is. But Travis, he's going to share his screen here and we're going to talk through it. And pro tip, if you come into distribution first, the membership, you get access to all the video content too. So you can actually see it happen. You know what I mean?
There you go.
A little fun plug there. But yeah, walk us through Motion's content flow, what you have going on. I love the look of this. It's just a basic flow chart, but I think sometimes we talked about simple is better. You know, simple is easy to follow.
That's right. So people are like, cool, we got into like 20-minute podcast to finally get something tactical. Well, here you go. Okay. Tactical nerds. This is the content flow, the content flywheel we use here at Motion. It all starts with a live stream video. And we have found that live stream events just really do well for our audience in terms of engagement, conversion into actual customers, and the ability for us to churn them out is not a huge lift at the moment. So yes, it does require a lot of work, but yeah, so we always go with a live stream with a popular subject matter expert as kind of our cornerstone piece of content that we're doing pretty much on a monthly basis. Sometimes we're doing more than one a month. For example, we're actually doing 5 over the next 5 weeks. It's one event, but it's 5 separate events. But anyway, that's our cornerstone piece of content that then during that live event, and this is the key part, you need to have your marketing team in the actual event monitoring the chat and seeing where and when people have the most questions, and when they have their aha moments that they're verbalizing. Oh, I never thought about it like that. Oh, this is so cool. Can't believe you're giving this away for free. Like, just skim those comments and screenshot that moment, right? And start taking notes. Have your marketing team taking notes. So later today, we're kicking off an event, and you better believe I'm going to be in those comments just lurking and asking questions and hyping people up and taking a ton of notes. At what point, what were we talking about? What was our subject matter expert explaining? What did they have up on the screen? And then taking that information and writing it into our email newsletter. Our email newsletter is called Thumbstop, and it's written by our head of content. He's a freaking genius. He's a really great writer. Shout out to James Mulvey, my boss. He just does a really great job of condensing complicated information. It doesn't read like a blog. It reads like an interview where like he almost interviewed the person. He injects his voice and his point of view into it, and that makes it super relatable. So we go live event into an email newsletter, and then we have a content marketing manager who takes that email newsletter and is like, okay, I'm going to SEO the absolute crap out of this and make sure that we're doing all of the proper things that a content manager needs to do in terms of like keyword stuffing and structure and titles and things of that nature. But this is where it also gets really helpful is both the SEO article and the email newsletter work with our brand designer to get like really badass custom visuals. And those are really helpful for cut pieces of content that I use on social. And that help me, because then I go in and read both the newsletter and the blog article, and I sit down, I have my drink, my coffee. I'm like, all right, I'm going to sit down and read this from start to finish and take notes of what I found to be most interesting and most helpful. And they usually are around those badass visuals that we had created, diagrams, charts, whatever it might be. And then I sit down and I write out a script that's usually about 5 to 7 minutes long. And then I film it here at my house. I take that raw footage, I film it in 4K. I've got a really badass studio here, so it looks nice. And I send it over to a video agency. And the video agency works their magic. They do all the editing for us. We get a design review from our designer to make sure everything looks on brand and looks good. And then we promote it. And that's kind of the breakdown of this. So we promote it both via paid and organic is kind of like the differentiator here, is we take our pieces that do the best from organic and we put some spend behind them as ads on Facebook, on Instagram, a little bit on LinkedIn as well. LinkedIn tends to have like a higher cost per leads, and that we're like, that's like a little bit too expensive. And our audience is predominantly marketing agencies, performance marketing agencies, and then e-commerce and direct to consumer brands that are publishing like $30,000 worth of paid ads every month. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Love that. Love that. How do you think about the promotion and the distribution side of that? So I love the flow here. I'm curious. Now you've got this bucket of stuff that's coming off of this. What do you do next with that as a social? Because you've got the email, that's one sense of distribution. You got SEO, hopefully that's another sense of distribution. But social, like, how do you make sure you're getting the most out of the stuff you're using? I think even speaking transparently, there are times, and I know this is true for people I talk with, like we create the assets or get the assets created and then never get around to actually promoting them. So I'm curious to hear like your real life story there.
That's a great question. And it's an area, that's why I study you. It's why I follow you. It's why I read your newsletter. It's an area that I'm trying to get better at. So frankly, like bear with me here. I feel like my strength is in the creation part and my distribution is where I'm trying to work out that muscle at the gym with Justin every week. But the way I try to think about it is going back to the simplifying the concept. When you come to a social post, that's scroll content. You need to be able to hook people in so that they hit the see more on LinkedIn with a strong hook that's just a few words and evokes an emotion and really only pays attention to one piece of information. You can't over inundate it. And that doesn't mean it needs to be like a short text post, but we take those beautifully designed graphics, we take the snippets from my video, and we try to do a couple of things. So with the cut content, I am cutting vertical videos, square videos for my longer video. I am taking those visual assets and writing a post on it. But then I'm also trying to find like ads in the wild that convey the concept we might be talking about. And those do really, really, really well in terms of engagement. So we'll take like a New Balance shoe ad that's like really popular, and we'll try to stop people in their scroll with like, oh, there's a New Balance ad and there's like some like crazy hook. And we'll work with influencers as well to help boost our post by commenting on it because they're relevant to it. So that's kind of the missing piece that people sometimes don't always understand, that if you're like, I need to like get our LinkedIn post to get more than 19 likes. It's like, well, you might need to take a page out of the Instagram influencer book and partner with folks who have huge followings that are related to you and your audience and tap into their audience and pay them for access to their audience so that you can get more looks and views and engagement metrics on your content to grow your followers. So that's kind of the paid part as well that I didn't mention. But taking cut content, working with influencers, creators who have big followings and getting them to comment on our posts, getting them to engage with us and help us promote it.
Love that. Yeah, I had a whole episode with Brett McGrath and we talked about using your network as a form of distribution. Now, tapping into the paid side is a whole other way to do that. But I like that, especially probably the ROI of dollars spent. It's probably an extremely high ROI for the amount of dollars that you're able to spend there.
Yeah.
And it's different naturally seeing it in the feed and seeing somebody you look up to or like comment on that versus seeing the promoted. I mean, you know, like an ad is still an ad, and they let you know that.
It is. And people might say like, oh, it's sketchy. Like, oh, you're using an engagement pod. It's not an engagement pod. It's just paying an influencer who has a shit ton of followers to help us promote our stuff by getting them to just comment on it. So that's a cool strategy that works. And it might not be everybody's cup of tea. And I'm like, oh, it still feels kind of icky. But if I was you, Justin, I could say like, let me find a way to get like a Seth Godin to create a partnership where I pay him $1,000 a month, just crazy, to comment on all of my posts with an image or a quote or a meme or something that relates to my post, and watch your numbers skyrocket, my man. It's a crazy hack. It works really well.
I like it.
You got to find somebody who's willing to do it though, and monetize and be like, can I pay you?
True. Yeah. Well, I love the flow. I love the way you've broken it down. There's so much more we can go into. Probably will have to in a 2.0 episode at some point. But dude, it was so fun to have you on. Don't limit yourself with only at the end we were practical. I think there was lots of practical good stuff we talked about throughout this episode. And I think people are going to take a lot out of it to be able to kind of merge the worlds as I'm seeing them in content marketing. So thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Distribution First, and thank you for listening all the way through. I appreciate you so much. And I hope you're able to apply what you learned in this episode one way or another into your content strategy as well. Speaking of strategy, we have a lot of things going on this year that are going to help you build your brand, 10x your content, and transform the way you do content marketing. Make sure to subscribe to the show and sign up for my newsletter at justinsimon.co so you don't miss a thing. I look forward to serving you in the next episode as well. And until then, take care, and I'll see you next time.